Hi everyone, Hobby Dad here, and I'm going to be kicking off doing a project turning a 75-gallon standard fish tank into a paludarium for all the frogs and geckos I have. My bearded dragon Toothless died a few days ago, and we're going to use this bigger tank to consolidate things up. So I'm going to show you the tank here. Just your standard Aqueon 75-gallon 4-foot by 18 inches for the 75-gallon tank. It's fairly new. As you can see here, I went to Ace Hardware and I gave them dimensions and had them cut a custom piece of plexiglass here, 5¼ inches tall, the width of the tank. When they cut it, it's going to have a square corner like this. There's silicone along the inside of the edges here, which raise up a little, and if you use the corner, it's going to cut into that. So I used some sandpaper and rounded off the corners. I'll do that last one here ultimately. I just wanted you to see the difference. And I also, it was a little bit long when I bought it, so kept sanding it down and trying it until it was exactly the right length. So I'm going to put that back in the tank. I'm going to use this Aqueon silicone sealant. You can buy this at fish stores. There's a lot of types you can use off the rack from like Home Depot or Lowe's. You just got to be real careful and read the back. Even if they say 100% silicone, quite a few of them have various anti-molding or antifungal agents that are toxic to the life and will leach out over time. So this is really expensive for what it is, but I don't need a lot. Just gonna beat around the edges of this insert once it's in there. It's about 55% is going to be on the right of the insert, and that is going to be the side of the tank that is filled with dirt, mix of topsoil and potting soil. The left will be filled with water up to the baffle, and then I'm going to put rocks along the water side and around the back in an L shape, gravel down in the bottom. Then in the back left corner, the rocks are going to go higher. I'm going to hide a pump behind them that should have a waterfall come over. And then we will plant up the planted side. Everything in here should be live, except for the back left corner. I'll put some fake plants in for now, but we'll plant some type of vining plants along the shoreline that I can hopefully get to grow around the locks like in the other smaller paludarium I have now. And we're going to move the pixie frog in here, the giant Madagascar day gecko, the golden gecko, common and knoll, and pretty much have all the rocks. So next step is I'm going to put this in, and you need to wait at least 48 hours for the silicone to cure. If you wait longer than that, especially if you live in a humid area, and once that's in, we'll take a view and then keep going from there. So while it hasn't been 48 hours yet, and we can't put water in, I did go get some red slate rock that had nice even cut edges that I can put up against the baffle in the wall, leaving this kind of open area. The previous tank was all gravel, a lot of them I have are, and over a long period of time, detritus builds up in there, it gets harder and harder to clean. So by covering a lot of it in this, I'll just take the gravel and fill in the open areas. I can't seem to find red slate gravel anymore, but I might be able to reuse and wash some good, or I might have to mix in some river rock. But I will, I'm not going to do that yet because I don't want to put anything in here that has any moisture on it. But I am going to place the rest of the big rocks and start building out the structure to see what it looks like. And then as we get closer to this being dry, then I'll probably add in the gravel and start working on adding in the soil at like the 36-hour mark and things like that, and we'll start working on the pumps. So the last time I did this, I used this pump to try to make a waterfall in the smaller paludarium. It's got plenty of power. It tends to get clogged up a bit, so I'm going to try to keep it up off the bottom with another rock here. But the other problem was once the water pumped up through the 1/2-inch hose, I had an L-shaped nozzle, but it was really powerful and it was hard to direct. So what I'm going to do this time and try is I took a little plastic cup I get crickets in and just trimmed a little piece out here to make it like an overflow box. And now I'm going to cut a hole in the bottom that is just the right size to run this plastic into here. Bring it right down so I can show you. We're going to insert the hose to just below where I've cut and silicone that in place. If we attached it lower, the pump would need to push all the water that's in the cup and create more head pressure, which would be less flow, which depending on the size of the pump and the distance actually could be beneficial. But I think since this is a tiny pump, I want it to not have to push all the water in the cup. And then I'm going to take the cup itself and I'm going to silicone it to the back wall. But before I do that, I'm going to get some more of the rocks I have and build up an example of what the rock work's going to look like in the left, so I can put this in a way that it's hidden and will spill just over onto the rock work. And then depending on what well hidden it is, I may need to paint this cup some type of brown, tan, or rock color to hide it in. I'll paint the outside obviously so the water's not exposed to the paint. So that is the next move, is cutting the hole, gluing the hose in, potentially painting it, siliconing it to the back wall, and doing the rest of this rock work. All right, and we're back. I had initially built this overflow box that I siliconed to the tube and was going to put in the back corner behind the rocks, but it turned out to be too big to hide easily, and I liked the way the rocks I had stacked up perfectly against the corner. And I've already placed the pump in the back, ran the cable up, get some glare there, and as you can see, the pump head is actually right there. So if you're looking at the tank from straight ahead, it's pretty much hidden. The water's going to pop out, hit that top rock, and should just sort of cascade everywhere. Because we can't put water in yet, we can't test it, but things are looking good on this side. I'm about to clean up some gravel and rinse it before I put it in, fill between the slate with some slate gravel, and then I have some other brown gravel to fill in this little upper hole. And I have picked up the organic topsoil and some peat moss, and then got to give this thing a little more drying time, but we'll pop that in. And I also picked up 6 or 7 new plants from the nursery to fill that side. I usually use like some vining plants and ferns and stuff, but they didn't have any ferns in stock. And the vining plants, while they grow in really nice and make it very natural looking, it also becomes very jungle-like, and for the large pixie frog that's going to be in here, it kind of makes it hard for him to move around. So I'm going to try to actually leave a little area unplanted, and these plants are more kind of like individual isolated plants that should leave room in between the plants where things aren't all tangled up. So we'll check back here shortly once I start pouring in the topsoil and peat moss and mixing that up. I'll show you what that looks like. We'll then plant everything up, put this gravel in, and then check back in before we add water. All right, so I finished up placing the rock work around the waterfall area and have cleaned up some red slate gravel from the old paludarium because I couldn't find new stuff anywhere, and have just filled in the seams between the plates, which is all I had enough to do. Tried to build up and stabilize some gravel coming out of here, and then I had some other light brown gravel I had to buy, and I'm using that to fill this little ledge area and behind the rocks up to the wall. And then in this little area here, I have just enough red slate left. I'll cover that. And then I bought the plants yesterday and have, whenever I'm doing something like this, try to plot out where things are going to go. This is a little more unnatural look, but very colorful. I usually do a lot of ferns and vines, but because I want to leave significant room between the bases for the large pixie frog to move around and be more active, I'm trying to get plants that aren't going to grow into each other at the ground level so much. So at this point, it's been like 42 hours. I'm going to start putting a little bit of water in the left side soon. I'm not going to fill it completely. I don't want to stress the divider wall to hold all the water once it's filled with dirt on the right. That will help support it, but I'm going to get it just deep enough to see if anything is leaking over through the bottom seam, and to then test the waterfall to make sure that all works before I go any further. If the wall is not completely watertight, I'm not going to take it apart and try to repair it. As I mentioned, the last one was just sort of casually divided with a pond liner and some rocks, and that largely works. It allows the dirt side to become very saturated with water, so if you don't want that, that's a problem. And the biggest issue is getting dirt washing back into the pond side, but if it was just a small leak through the silicone, that's not going to be an issue. At this point, the main detritus will probably come from crickets and other things that fall into the water and decompose. So I'm gonna start filling this up with water and we'll be back soon. So I filled it up about a third of the way. Don't see any water leaking out over here. And the waterfall, shockingly, actually seems to be not overspraying, hitting the top there and cascading down the rocks fairly nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and take these plants out, fill the right with dirt and plant everything up, and then we'll check that out. So now I got the topsoil. I used good organic topsoil. It's closer to peat moss. It doesn't really clump and stay wet, and it doesn't have chemicals that the frogs can absorb into their skin. And some peat moss, and I got all the plants here put in. And this big terror rock. And so what I need to do is pour a little more gravel here in behind that rock, and then top this off with the red rock. And I also brought down this piece of spider wood from the other tank, which fits nicely on top of those rocks and down into the water. So I'm going to fill in that gravel, try to put some other rocks here on top to cover up the seam, fill up the water, and I'm going to put one plastic plant over the waterfall to kind of cover up the power cord and stuff there until maybe something grows that way. And then I'll get the lights on here so we can get a better look at it. Everything's kind of glary here. So here is our final product. Looks great, I think. I've got just over 6 gallons of water to fit into the water side, and that's with all the rocks in there. That was actual water added. Got our slate and gravel in there. Kind of a nice drop-off look. The waterfall's working real good. Put that artificial plant in there. Move the light back a little. Pixie frog's actually way back in the back underneath there. So, hope you enjoyed watching me build this. If you have any questions about materials or process or anything that I didn't skip to try to keep the video down to about 12 minutes, just ask in the comments. Please smash that like button, and I'd greatly appreciate if you subscribe. Thank you for watching.